This is Evil West. We're here on Xbox Series X. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. So what are we getting here on the Series X? Well, we have two visual options that are present. The first, which you're seeing right away, is the quality mode. So this is a 4K resolution at 30 FPS. There is also a performance mode, which is 1080p at 60 FPS. So, it definitely seems like we're getting the full 4K here, and it uses an array of very, very bright, vibrant colors that are kind of striking. Sort of like, say, Control. You'll get a lot of different scenes where it's really, really vibrant red, really, really vibrant yellow. Stuff like that will keep changing things up, which is kind of interesting as you play through the game. So we're staying on quality mode for a little bit here, because essentially you have to restart the whole game in order to actually enjoy the different modes. And you start it with quality mode, and then, you can change once you get into things. So this is actually the new game plus. You can't, or at least I didn't see any options for me to go and replay levels or anything. You just literally were like, you finished the game, now you gotta restart from the beginning with tougher enemies, but all your cool gear and everything like that. So if you're wondering why I'm all decked out, that's because I got the good stuff, I guess you would say, or I've got all the abilities and whatnot. So yeah, I'd say quality mode looks really, really good. Honestly, it does look quite nice. I would have loved literally, like a 40 FPS mode, or even something like 1440-60 would have been nice. And I don't really know why, because it doesn't seem like it's the type of game that would be too demanding for something in the middle of 1080 and, 4K, right? Like, something in between there. Just a higher resolution at 60. Now, the only thing I could think of is maybe the co-op. Because, okay, so to do co-op, you actually have to go to the main menu and set up co-op. You can't do it while you're playing stuff. It's very, very restricted. And that's where some elements of this kind of make it feel like something that would have come out, I don't know, late in the 360 era or early Xbox One era. Just in terms of the design of the game, the way you move through it, the battling, everything like that. Kind of really, it's sort of one of those next-gen shines, because it is kind of really gory and visually striking and very, it's quite neat from an aesthetic, like a visual standpoint and aesthetic. I actually quite like how this one looks, but it plays in such a linear design and setup that it really does feel like something that is quite aged. It's also just utterly and insanely grindy. So we've played a bit of it with the quality mode. There's different difficulties too. We're going to switch over and we're going to go to the performance mode. So yeah, now we gotta go back, and we gotta restart the game. I hate games that force you to do that, to change the resolution settings. Again, something that feels very much last gen in its design. Like, it doesn't take too long to boot it up, obviously, on the Series X. Like you'll see here, we're gonna get right back into the game in seconds, but it's still a big inconvenience. And it feels like you're playing two versions of the same game. So there's the multiplayer. You literally have to go through multiplayer to set this up. And then you can choose from checkpoint, you could choose from the beginning of the mission, stuff like that, and you can invite your friends. So that's the multiplayer lobby concept. It's kind of interesting. And then we'll just quickly show that this is the new game plus. I'm on the first level and I have a high level character, so obviously it's a new game plus. Everything loads really fast, which kind of, again, makes me sort of wonder, why this game has really hard sort of stop loading segments, where it's basically, oh, we better go on to this new place, and then you just sort of load into a new area at times. It's very weird, because it just doesn't seem like it was designed with modern loading and techniques at all. A lot of games for, literally since the late 360 era have had this, the high loading inside of, doing stuff and blah, blah, blah. And this one, maybe here or there, it seems to have a lot of these little stopping points where that could be happening, but it's just like it's a really, really bizarre setup, and it feels like a game that's sort of just out of place and lost in time, almost. So yeah, again, we're on the, you know, the performance mode, so it is a huge resolution dip, but obviously having that 60 FPS is just, to me, really, really important for, you know, doing big battles or boss fights, or just dealing with like a large quantity of enemies, which is where I get to the kind of point where this game is insanely repetitive, like frustratingly repetitive. So they will introduce a boss, and then that boss will become a regular enemy. It's like, you know, a lot of games do that. It feels like an older, cheaper structuring concept. You know, a budgetary thing. And, like, honestly, it's just... It gets a little... It gets annoying. Like, obnoxiously annoying when you have to fight the same bat thing, like, 100 times. And it's, like, supposed to be, like, a special enemy. So they're spongy. And then it's like, oh, fight like 3 of them at the same time, or there'll be like 6 guys with shields. It'll be like, the first time they introduce a shield guy, it's like, oh, it's a big deal. And then you're fighting like 6 or 7 of them in one spot alongside these other enemies, alongside these other enemies. But it's not like there's a variety of enemies. It's the same enemies over and over and over. Like, the campaign structure is essentially move through a bunch of linear spaces fighting groupings of enemies you've already fought numerous times, and then fight a boss. And then you get like a cutscene. And there's like a small hub area, but it doesn't really make any sense. It's probably one of the most quintessential hub spaces I've ever seen. You don't do anything in it. You just walk through it, and the cutscene plays, and then you move on to the new area. So it's just like, it really is such an odd game. And, you know, the thing is, it's like, it's not necessarily like a bad game, but it's just not a very good game, if that makes sense. Like, it's okay. It's alright. It gets the job done. Like, you know, sure, the combat looks kind of cool at the beginning, and oh, it's gory, and oh, it's got cool executions. And yeah, this character kind of feels a little badass. Cool little weapons that you know, improve and get all this cool stuff. And yeah, it's got some neat action scenes. And yeah, I like that there's weird werewolf things and vampire stuff and other monsters, and it's all kind of creepy and grotesque. And, you know, I like the environments. They feel kind of large in scale. They hit the Western period quite well. You know, there's neat cinematic bits. I like the cinematics. I like the in-game, very, very cinematic-y movie segments and stuff. Those are cool. But, you know, you sit there, and it's like a several-hour game, you know. You sit there and you play this, and there's a certain point where it's just like, I am so sick of this game. I am so just, like, it really overstays its welcome. Now, I do compare this, and I was doing this because I, you know, sat there, I streamed the whole thing, and I was sitting there being like, you know, technically this is a very God of War-esque game. You know, it's got a similar stance. You go around kind of fighting enemies in small linear areas. You know, it's got like a focus on kind of like story and cool special moves, and you do, there's like kind of puzzles. They're not really puzzles, to be honest, in this one. Like, you'll never sit there and actually kind of be questioning what you're doing. But you know what I mean, like structurally, you could kind of make a comparison between this and God of War. This being a double A title, yeah, 2 A's. And, you know, God of War being the full triple A setup, where it's, you know, budget and a bigger team and a bigger scope. So, like, to a degree, you know, I will say that this one is kind of, I think, trying to punch almost above its weight. But if it would have had a tighter story with less of a repetitive grind, I think that would have been better. Because it really overstays its welcome. The last 3 hours of it, like literally half the game, I was just like, I want this to end. I'm so tired of fighting the same thing. And that's such a shame, because the environments, again, are really neat and quite varied. You may think the West is going to be a very similar setup, but no. You go in like creepy caves, there's like a big oil rig type level, there's creepy marshes, there's like a big opera scene. There's there's just so many different varied places that you end up going in this game, and the art direction is very, very good. And snowy mountaintops, or really mechanical type places, or spooky lost hidden below the world temple type things. And that's kind of cool. Again, it's all linear. There's like two spots in the game where it's like slightly opens up, but I wouldn't say that's like opening up at all. It's just literally like it's all linear. It's just very, very linear. And then there's like points where it's saying you'll get rewarded if you go off the path, and it's a side area where you burn some cobwebs and there's the chest right there. It's not even like walking off into the distance or anything. It's just kind of like, again, it's sort of really comical in that concept where it's like, it is insanely linear. But that's where I go back to that point of that God of War-esque comparison, is if you kind of took this concept, which I think the concept's really cool. I think the world and the lore is interesting. And you sort of blew it up with a larger budget, and you kind of gave it a larger, more intense story focus. You could actually get up to a level of something greater than this one achieves. Because like I said, it's not like a bad game, but it's also not like a great game. It's like aggressively okay. It's just exhausting to play, and I don't really want to play it again. I mean, I would assume maybe, depending on how this one goes, there might be like a sequel at some point. But like, I would probably take a look at it, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of spongy repetitiveness to this game. I can only kill the same vampire giant monster so many times before I'm sitting there just going like, please end this nonsense. And it's just even the gameplay mechanics themselves, going again to that God of War comparison, since that was so recent at the time of filming this. They do mix things up to a degree. Even that feels a bit repetitive over time, but this one is just like the same structuring. So you also get constantly told about like tooltips and stuff, which is kind of funny. But so the game has like some little RPG-like mechanics where you move through these skill trees. I don't really find that you actually get too much out of doing any of this stuff. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It really... It's just sort of like is little things, but I didn't find that when I was getting any of these abilities, improving any of this stuff, that I was actually getting anything out of it. Like, I didn't feel like my character was getting more powerful. There's also like weapon upgrades where if you've got, enough money that you've found while playing, you can, buy sort of the gun upgrades, weapon upgrades and stuff. Again, in the context of me not really feeling as though this did anything. And there's also, well, I mean, you get like flashier looking weapons, I guess, and it does improve the damage a bit, but I didn't really feel a sense of progression with that. And there's some costume type stuff you can find too if you want to change up your character a bit. And they've got like a nice lore tab that tells you about stuff going on in the world. Even story-wise, though, I was kind of wanting a bit more of an in-depth look into like the lore, if that makes sense, as in sort of like, okay, there's familiars and blah blah blah. For someone not familiar with the concepts at play here, how does that factor in? Is like, what are the werewolf type connections? What is this and stuff? And I was like, okay, but you get the sense of the main story. You're like a dude, trying to live up to your father's legacy, or not really caring at all, I guess. And you're in an institution, and then you become a scrappy little squad. And then you're essentially fighting a bunch of things that are causing problems. The vampires and whatnot. So, again, story-wise, there's quite a bit to it. It goes on for a bit. It is several hours, like I've mentioned. It tells a fine tale. It was a small, sort of like, I wouldn't say intimate tale, but it's a closed-off story. It tells its own little thing. And, that's fine. talking about co-op, you know, it is, you could play the entire thing in co-op, and that's where the concept, again, of, like, I was thinking, did I actually go over that to a degree? I kind of trail off, but, you know, where I was thinking performance-wise, maybe the 1080-60 is because of co-op, which to me is kind of like a little nonsensical because I'd rather have not had co-op, but it's still, yeah, co-op is fun in this, you know, it's not bad, you know, I enjoyed playing it with another person. I thought that was fine, you know. We shot some stuff. It is kind of hilariously awkward though, because you'll be like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, okay, so all these little segments where you're like swinging across things or jumping across stuff, which happens all the time, can be like a little awkward where you like either like phase through each other, or one person goes and the other person waits, and you know, it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just kind of like almost comical, if that makes sense, most of the time. There are also some bugs in this one. Nothing too bad. I had one game crash, and another game, like I had one where it just straight up crashed, and then I had another where it crashed because I opened up like the settings on the Xbox app and went back into the game during co-op, and the whole thing just like deteriorated, the sound cut out, everything stopped working. So that was a little crazy for sure. Yeah, I definitely wasn't sort of expecting that, but, you know, it happens, I guess. And then there's, like, some other bugs where some creatures would, like, get stuck off the map and stuff. Like, the checkpoints are good, but sometimes the checkpoints are like, why don't you just start me in this battle area instead of making me redo this one thing? But I don't know, it's sort of like, again, it's just okay, this game. You know, it looks flashy, it looks cool, I'm sure, for a lot of people. But when you really get into it, it's okay. You know, it's not really anything too mind-blowing. It's a pretty average, alright experience, you know. It's not really something I look forward to necessarily revisiting at any point down the road. I've had my fill of it. And like I said, it's just like the repetitive insanity that happens as you go on in this game is just like utterly mind-blowing, if that makes sense. Like, you literally, and it's harder to show because we're not in one of those later areas. I'm just trying to see if there's anything like different that I didn't get last time as we're going through this. It's just like, I couldn't believe how many times I would fight the same grouping of enemies, and then you'd go into the next area and you'd fight the same grouping of enemies again, and then you go into the next spot and there'd be like another slight combination change up of them. It was just crazy because it ruins the earlier element of, hey, this thing was a boss, it was scary. B, you know, I'm sick and tired of fighting the same thing over and over again. It drives me nuts. I am very happy that we have games like this, you know, that come out, these different, you know, sort of titles that don't take necessarily forever to play, that are a little bit different, you know, offer something a little bit new, you know, different stories, different characters, different concepts. That's great. You know, that's really, really awesome. At the same time, you know, it still doesn't necessarily excuse it from, like, kind of being really, really tiring to sort of play and whatnot. Oh, so it's like a detonating grenade? That seems less effective than what it used to be. Huh. But yeah, I mean, if you do like it, you do have fun with another person or something like that, you know, obviously, as you've seen, you know, New Game Plus, so you can play it again. You know, co-op is kind of enjoyable. I had a good time with the co-op. The snow deformation in this game is actually very, very impressive. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm good on this game after, you know, this, and I think it definitely overstayed its welcome and got to a point where I was just sick of it, and it's something I don't want to really think a whole lot of anytime soon. That is for sure.